Lana from Baptcare Karingal community in Devonport, Tasmania. Welcome back to Baptcare Volunteering. We are so excited that in the coming weeks we can invite you to return to your normal volunteer role. Before you return, however, there are some things that have changed and some reminders we would like to share with you. We hope you will watch this video and answer the questions at the end so we can begin partnering with you to provide important support to our residents.
I'm Lucy, the Lifestyle and Volunteer Coordinator at Amberley in Druin. I'm going to talk to you today about flu vaccinations. As you may be aware, the government now asks everyone who visits an aged care facility to ensure that they are up with their flu vaccinations. Without this, you will not be able to volunteer with us anymore, unless you have a special approval for medical exemption from Baptcare. Your volunteer coordinator will be able to guide you through the process for exemption if this applies to you. If you have already had your flu shot, we ask you to provide a copy of the certificate as well as a signed consent form for us to retain this information to your volunteer coordinator. Once we have had your vaccination certificate and consent form, you will be provided with a flu vaccination card to show that you have been immunised.
You've been asked to complete hand hygiene training online through Better Impact. The instructions should have been sent to you via Better Impact previously. My Impact has a video for you to watch and then answer some questions. It will take about 2 minutes to do this. Please take the time to undertake this training. It can be found under My Profile on the right-hand side. If you have a mobile telephone, it's on the left-hand side under the menu, and it's in the drop-down from that menu under training. If you have not completed this, you will not be able to volunteer and will need to speak to your volunteer coordinator. They will then make arrangements for you to do this training. It will only take a couple of minutes and will record your success at the completion of this automatically. Your volunteer coordinator will be notified when you have passed this successfully, for which they will need to know before they can approve you for visits. You will also need to have completed the questions at the end of this induction video to be able to volunteer. Please click on the link and answer the questions. When you arrive at your RAC site, you will be required to answer some questions and to be screened for possible illnesses. When you first enter, you will be greeted and asked for your name and your role, such as if you're a family member, contractor, staff, or volunteer. The person will check their list of appointments and ask you to sanitize your hands. Make sure that you cover your entire hands, the front and the back, and in between your fingers, and especially around the fingernails. Feel free to use more hand sanitizer if needed. They will ask you to keep your distance at all times from everyone, including the residents, which means no hugs, and this is vitally important. There is signage everywhere in the building to remind you about social distancing, so please take every precaution possible to maintain this.
Hi, I'm Jessica Day. I'm the Lifestyle and Volunteer Coordinator at St Hilary's. I'm going to be talking to you about what happens when you come back to volunteering at your sites, as we now have entry requirements for anyone entering the home, including volunteers. You will be asked for your flu vax card and will need to have this present at all times. Please either attach it to your lanyard or keep it in your car so that it is always with you. No card means no entry. You'll be asked a series of questions. Have you been into contact with anyone who has COVID or may be awaiting COVID test results in the past 14 days? Have you worked anywhere where COVID has been present in the past 14 days? Have you been experiencing any respiratory symptoms over the past 14 days? You may also be asked about travel. Staff will write down your answers and then sign off to say that you have been checked.
From the volunteer program team, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about what visits will look like from now on. This needs to be less than an hour, and you will be given direction as to what to do so that you have exited the building before the hour is over. You may be asked to stick to certain floors or zones in your facility, and please follow all staff directions carefully. When you exit, please remember to sign out and clock off via My Impact. Should an outbreak occur at your residential aged care community, we will notify you by email, and visits will no longer be available. If you have been in contact with anyone who has been affected, you will be contacted via phone as soon as we can to talk you through the next steps. We hope this will never be needed, but wanted to let you know that we will keep you in the loop as much as we can.
I'm Liana. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Headley Sutton in Camberwell. There are also some changes to the way in which we will be operating. For our residents who do not have families or visitors, we are hoping that we can organise some visits from their companion volunteers. This may include the pastoral volunteers who offer spiritual care support as well. We want to ensure that every resident who is isolated has someone to connect to, and for the first few weeks, these residents will be our priority. For our companion volunteers, where you may have visited a few residents when you normally volunteer, for the next few weeks, we'll be only asking you to visit 1 or 2. You will not be allowed to walk around or through the building as you normally do, but you will be asked to proceed directly to the resident that you are there to visit, and will spend some time with them. This does not mean that you cannot maintain your connection with other residents by phone or virtual means, like you have been doing. Simply that you will only visit one resident face to face. Your volunteer coordinator will help you to organise these visits. We know that this isn't ideal and a change from your normal volunteer role, but we wish to thank you for your understanding and cooperation during this time. If you do have any questions on the day, please seek out a staff member. Thank you.
Katie Eves, and I am the Lifestyle and Volunteer Coordinator from Heritage Manor in Gippsland. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our new guidelines. You will need to follow the directions provided by the staff on site regarding when and where you can go when you are in our facilities, and you will need to book your visits in prior to attending. As per the government guidelines, we are limiting the number of visits to the facility each day, so bookings are essential to ensure that we are compliant with the guidelines. If you would like to visit, you will need to contact your volunteer coordinator who can book you in, and we'll check that you have completed all of the training and provided your flu shot information to us.
We have all heard the government requests for us to clean our hands, refrain from touching our faces, and many more directives about infection control. We would like to ask you to take this one step further. As you may be aware, the risk of infectious disease like gastro or seasonal infections like influenza is significant in the aged care setting. We also live in a post-COVID-19 environment, so pandemic disease transmission measures need to be vigilantly implemented. In our volunteer induction, handbook and training, and quality standards 3, we discuss the importance of infectious control and not giving out medication to our residents. It is also a requirement for all volunteers to have training in and practice all hygiene and infectious control measures, including: do you have a current influenza vaccination? Temperature screening before entrance of an aged care facility. Not attending the volunteer if you have any symptoms or have been in contact with someone who is unwell with any condition, in particular any infectious disease. Influenza vaccination with evidence of this provided to Baptcare. Segregation within facilities during pandemic or during outbreak of infectious disease is a strategy to limit spread. This means that you will only visit specific areas and must stay within these boundaries. Volunteers need to be aware of not moving across segments at the home, the number and locations of residents visited, and having contacts within or outside the home which could compromise the effectiveness of our infectious control measures.
So, thanks for sticking with us so long and watching so much of the video. There's still a bit to go. So what we'd like you to do is to go and wash your hands, grab a cup of tea, and then come back, and then Marion Deans from our Coast Haven community is going to take you through how to correctly wash your hands with soap and water or with hand sanitizer. Thanks.
I'm Marianne Deans. I'm one of the nurse unit managers and educator at Coast Haven, and I'm here today to talk about hand washing. There's two kinds of ways that you can wash your hands. So you can either use a basin or else you can use the hand sanitizer. The reason that you would choose a basin is if your hands are visibly soiled, then you would always use the basin and soap and water. If they're not, then you're welcome to use the sanitizer. So you start the process by removing your jewellery. So you take your rings off, take your watch off. Let's pretend I've done that. If you're using the basin, so you get the water running, use warm water, not too hot. We don't want to dry out your hands, but not too cold either. Hopefully you're using a basin that has a non-touch kind of tap that you can either use your elbow to turn the water on. If you don't have that accessible, you can use a towel to turn the tap on. So you start by getting your hands wet and then get enough soap onto your hands, a good amount, so that you're able to lather up onto your hands. And the process for washing then is the same as for the sanitizer. So when you're using the sanitizer, press the dispenser all the way down. There we go. And you're rubbing across the surface of your hands here, rubbing across the top, both hands, going in between the fingers, all the way down, and the other side. And then in between the other direction as well. Go around the thumb, both sides. And then we want to get the pads of your fingers, so we go like that. And then we're aiming to do your fingertips, so we're going around this way as well on both sides. And then we're doing this one, which I always find hard on that side. This side's easier. So we're just wriggling backwards and forwards. And lastly, we're doing the wrists. So the whole process, when you're using the sanitizer, should take 20 to 30 seconds. If you're using the basin, it should take slightly longer, about 40 to 60 seconds. So with the basin, then you're rinsing off your hands. Try and rinse them downwards so that they're not going to drip back down your arm. And use paper towel to dry. So squeezing, patting dry, and then getting a fresh paper towel to turn off those taps, or else using your elbows again to turn them off. It's important always with your hands to pay attention to the condition of your hands to make sure that there's no cracks in them. If you do have any cracks to keep them covered while you're at work, using a Band-Aid or some kind of waterproof dressing, and to moisturise regularly as well to keep them in good condition. If you're using the sanitizer a lot, you should always be using it before and after you touch a person or their belongings. Every now and then you should use the warm water in the basin just to give yourself a good wash, because it can build up a bit of a residue on your hands. And I think that's it.
Hi, I'm Dominique and I'm the Volunteer Program Lead at Baptcare, and today I'd like to talk to you about professional boundaries for volunteers. Boundaries in any volunteer role are vitally important to ensure that everyone understands their limits. To explain why this is so important, I want to share with you a story about some volunteers who helped someone But unfortunately, they crossed the boundaries of their role and actually caused harm to someone, even though they had the best of intentions as volunteers. The story begins with two Meals on Wheels volunteers called Liz and John. Liz and John had been delivering Meals on Wheels meals for years and were on shift 3 days a week. For 3 years, they had been visiting a gentleman who was 82 who lived in their local community called Jim. And they had, over the 3 weekly visits, they'd struck up a friendship. One day, Liz and John arrived at Jim's to find him visibly upset. As it turned out, Nick, the young man down the road, had befriended him and had gained access to his bank accounts and had taken $1,200 out of Jim's bank account to buy himself a car. Jim was really upset. Instead of calling us, Liz and John drove him to the bank, made him change his passwords on his account, stood behind him and literally took control out of how Jim decided to resolve the situation without giving him choices, and then dropped him off back home. Overnight, Nick had found out about the passwords because he'd gone in to try and take some more money, and he'd gone to Jim's house and threatened him, and he'd also threatened the volunteers. Jim was so upset, he rang the office in the morning and banned Liz and John from ever coming back to his house. He didn't want them anywhere near him. He didn't tell us, however, what had been going on, so we rang Liz and John and said, come into the office and tell us what's going on. And when they did, they were horribly distressed because all they had tried to do was help. Had they actually stopped and asked us for help and checked in to see what they should do, we would have got some elder abuse experts or maybe even the police involved. Because they didn't, Jim was now absolutely terrified and believed Nick's threat that he was going to have him committed and put in an asylum or a home, and that he would actually hurt the volunteers. It took a long time for Jim to actually tell us what had happened and for us to be able to tell Liz and John what had happened because they had no idea what they'd done wrong. And by that time, Jim had had to move into a home because Nick had stolen most of his money because we couldn't get the police involved or the elder abuse specialist early enough. I don't think that Liz and John did anything that we wouldn't do for a friend, but as a volunteer, you can't act like a friend. You've got to keep those boundaries separate. Had they contacted us, things could have been very, very different, and Jim may have been able to live at home for the rest of his day. Please remember that boundaries are there for not only yourself, but also for the clients that we serve. Every role has a position description, and we ask you to sign these to ensure that you know what the boundaries are for your role. And initially, when you come back into the site, you'll be asked to sign a new PD that says you agree to stay in the zones or on the floors and not wander around and up and down the lifts so that we can keep everyone safe. Please note that we also have highly trained specialist staff who can manage any situation that comes up with a client. So please remember not to step outside the boundaries of your role, as you can inadvertently do more harm. One of the ways that we'd like to ask you to help us to control the possibility of infection coming into our communities is to ask you to take a self-assessment before you come to volunteering. We want you to do this once you recommence volunteering, which we know it may be some time, and also before you arrive at your appointment to visit a resident. We'd like you to go through these questions and ask yourself if you say yes or no, and maybe have a chat to your volunteer coordinator about them. The questions are, have I had a temperature or any respiratory symptoms in the past 14 days? Do I know anyone who's been in contact with someone affected by COVID or who is affected by COVID? Am I well enough to be sure that I am not at risk of passing on some kind of illness, as in, are you symptom-free? Am I at risk because of my age, any health issues, my family situation, maybe you have vulnerable children, you might be pregnant, or otherwise? And should you be volunteering at this time? And do you feel safer waiting a little longer? Because while we want you back, there's no rush. If you're not feeling comfortable and safe, we want you to say, I'm not ready. The other question, have I or any member of my family travelled recently and need to self-isolate? So it's really just asking yourself the question of, is there any reason that I should not volunteer at this time? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, please contact your volunteer coordinator to discuss volunteering. And if you've made an appointment already, please call to cancel, as numbers are limited and we need to be able to contact someone else to say, hey, a slot's opened up, you can come and see your family or another volunteer might be able to pop in and say hello to someone. If you've answered no to all of these questions, talk to your volunteer coordinator about when you can commence face-to-face volunteering, or if you've already been approved to visit because you've already had that, make an appointment. But please, every time you come to visit, ask these questions again. Remember, there is nothing preventing you from continuing to volunteer virtually or remotely while we wait for the time where we can invite you back face-to-face, or that you feel safe coming in face-to-face. It's also been a little while since we have spoken to you about the new aged care quality standards. As you know, the new standards came in July last year, and they reflect a change in the way that we support residents and the way in which you volunteer with us. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to send you an updated copy of the training guide for the new standards and ask that you re-familiarise yourself with the standards before coming to volunteer, and also talk to your volunteer coordinator if you've got any questions. If you would like to review a quality standards training video, please ask your volunteer coordinator and they can link you in. Finally, thank you all so much for your boundless patience and cooperation in helping us to get ready for our volunteers to return to their volunteer roles in our residential aged care community. We hope that in time things return to normal, but we know that this may take some time before all restrictions are lifted, and that even if you do come back, that things may change and we may have to pull you out again, and we hope that you'll forgive us. In the meantime, we'd like to say thank you again for all of you who have been able to continue volunteering either remotely or virtually, and we hope that you'll keep it up even when you return to the face-to-face volunteering that we know you love. We look forward to hearing how your training has gone and to having you back as our fantastic volunteers, hopefully in the near future, but we also want to make sure that you only come back when you're ready to. Stay safe and well and keep washing those hands.